It's Steam Next Fest October 24, and I'll be playing lots of shoot 'em up, bullet hell and survivor-like games in this video to see whether or not I like them and if they stayed on my wish list. And spoiler alert, almost every single game does. So without further ado, let's kick off with Airanblade, which is a vertical shoot 'em up that reminded me a little bit of late PS1 and Sega Saturn era shoot 'em ups, because at that point you was having 3D objects fly into the screen and then become 2D on the plane that you're shooting, and this follows the same trope. So big bosses will come in 3D environments that look very PS3 era to me, in the nicest way possible, I mean this, by the way. And as they come in, they kind of smash bits of the environment around them, and so the world felt lived in and busy, and I felt like I was part of a bigger war that was taking place. Control-wise, this game was exceptionally fluid, and you also have the ability to trigger a bullet time and slow things down and weave in and out of really tight woven bullet hell moments, as well as triggering a force field when you get hit, or you could have it so that it triggers automatically. If you get hit by one bullet, it will then ping on and kind of save you from the rest. I really enjoyed this game. It felt like a great retro throwback whilst having some modern polish on it, and the game looked quite substantial as well, particularly as you was able to move up and down various different speeds of how fast the game would trigger, and I'm interested to see how that mechanic plays out across the entire game. Really interesting and exciting. Can't wait to see more. Next up is Traxion 3000, which is a thrust-based shoot 'em up. And so instead of going horizontal or vertical, you're thrusting using air thrusters around various different terrains and environments, different alien landscapes, trying to rescue civilian hostages or survivors of things, whilst shooting all of the various different aliens and attack things, and also using a traction beam that you use to pick up objects and either put them in the path of enemy fire so that you can get past like a very narrow corridor that otherwise you wouldn't be able to unless you had something there blocking the fire, or it's just to clear your path. And what I found interesting with this game was that every time you get hit, you don't have health necessarily. I mean, you do, but you don't. It's more than likely that you'll run out of fuel before you run out of health, because every time you hit something, you lose fuel as well as health. And so what I found with this game was that it became quite restrictive in how far you could go without having to run back and get some refueling so that you could then continue on. And I felt like the demo also broke partway through because I couldn't work out how to progress something, and I'd explored every option and couldn't really spot what I needed to do next. So perhaps there needs to be a bit more in terms of telegraphing what the player needs to do in order to progress through the game. But the seeds are here for something decent. However, I do think on this list Traxion 3000 is one of the weaker entries. Next up is Varyznex. I think I've butchered that name, but oh well, the game was fantastic. I adored this. It was fast, it was fluid, it was very full-on arcade bullet hell craziness. Fantastic pumping soundtrack in the background that really got me in the mood for this too. And the other thing I really liked about this game as a horizontal shoot 'em up was that you could rearrange your weapons so that they could be predominantly behind you or in front of you, or more vertical so that they would be above and below you, and you could press different buttons and rearrange them into different situations, whilst also having them upgrade and become more powerful over time as well. And so you could then focus your shots into a specific laser beam that could be targeted and very powerful, but in doing so that opened you up to quite a lot of laser beams flying back again. This was an absolute joy to play and definitely one of my favourites on this list. And it's odd because the really pixelated graphic style might initially be a bit of a harsh wall for some people, but I have to say your eyes adjust to it really, really quickly, and your eyes start to add in detail that isn't necessarily there, but it also fixates your eyes on what's an attack coming towards you because they stand out because of the just sheer light patterns that are going on screen. So this one's an absolute blast. It'll be a definite day one for me, as will Airanblade earlier on. Can he wait? Sidestepping across into the anime world, we have Randomax, and this is a vertical shoot 'em up that really intrigued me because of the way how it does weapon progression. So in a similar way to a Survivors-like game, Each of your 3 weapons that you start off with can be upgraded to do new things over time, but those weapons have somewhat of a shelf life too. And so whenever you come across a weapons disposal shop, you choose which of a couple of different upgrades you can have, and then you decide which of your 3 weapons you're going to attach it to. And it could be that you go all in on one type of weapon and make it absolutely mega monstrously powerful, or you could spread it out across the 3 weapons themselves, and it's entirely up to you. But what it means is that your weapons, I guess, skill tree, for want of a better phrase, can be really wide and different, and it made each run that I did in Randomax feel very varied and different. That, on top of the fact that it was fast-paced and fluid, the controls worked really well, it made it really clear where your hit detection was for this game too, which sometimes in shoot-em-ups that are very full-on the bullet hell sphere, you kind of go, what am I supposed to be trying to avoid? It was really clear here. And so all of this combined with some really snazzy jazz music and some really nice theming and just overarching anime story tropes made Randomax, again, another fantastic thumbs up for me. Next up is Variator, and Variator for me sits side by side with Airanblade because they offer the same type of experience. It's 3D objects flying into a 2D plane. I think Variator has potentially a bit more of a cinematic vibe to it, but it also has interesting junctions mid-level for you to spear off to and have different experiences. In the same way how R-Types and the Gradius games used to have you kind of spearing off in between like A and B as you went through an overworld map, this was doing this in the middle of a level, which I thought was quite cool. I didn't quite fully understand some of the mechanics around how you build up more shields and score in this game compared to others, and I'd like to have explored that a little bit more, but the fundamental gameplay here is absolutely sublime. And what Variator also does is introduce an awful lot of furniture in a level that can A, be used to stop you being able to shoot opponents directly because they'll hide behind it, but B, you can also use it potentially to ricochet some of your bullets off to take it around corners and things like that, which was quite cool. And so Variator for me, again, bang on the wish list, will be another one that I'll pick up very, very quickly on release. Definitely a thumbs up from me. Next up is Rainbow Fighters, and I enjoyed this game, but less compared to some of the other ones that I've said would be day one pickups. I don't think Rainbow Fighters will be a day one for me. This merges together elements of Survivor games, so you've got 5 different weapons, I think it was, with different colours on, and they can all be upgraded as you go. And that's fine from a horizontal shooter perspective, but where Rainbow Fighters really excelled for me was that it shifted perspectives, and at some points in the demo it was becoming like a lane-based shooter where things were coming towards you like a Star Fox game, and it became an on-rails shooter, and I really liked this kind of switching of perspectives. And if Rainbow Fighter leans more into that, it makes it stand out more from the crowd and makes it feel unique and different, and so more of that please. The moment-to-moment shooting felt fine, but I did run into occasions in this demo where I was stuck where enemies were off the screen and I was still trying to shoot them, but the game hadn't realised that they were off the screen or out of my zone of control, so I couldn't progress sometimes. So I had to restart this demo a few times, and that kind of problem persisted throughout. So definitely some bugs that need fixing. The overarching experience was perfectly fine and acceptable, and it definitely stayed on my wish list. Next up is the joy that is Shockwave Triggers, and this again is a throwback to anime shoot-em-ups of the mid and early 90s. Beautiful graphics that were very full-on and colourful and in your face, and the idea behind this is more, because whenever you shoot things it spurts out like hundreds of different pickups for you to try and collect, and this game has somewhat of a ping-pong break the enemy fire mode to it. So as the enemies try to fire towards you, you can trigger a special ability that gets an aura around you that turns anything within that aura that's enemy fire into pickups that can charge your special attack. And so you're trying to work out when's the best chance to trigger that so that you can grab as much as possible, suck it all in, and then shoot it out in a massive laser beam of attack damage back at your bosses or just walls of enemies. It was fast, it was fluid, the hit detection worked exceptionally well here, and what I also liked was that each character had various different attack patterns, but you could switch out different attack patterns for characters too, meaning that there's lots of different ways to play this game over the course of time. So yeah, another big thumbs up from me, and another one that I'll probably get on day one. Next up is UFO Blast, and this is the real merger of Survivors-like and shoot 'em up, because this is a thruster-based arena shoot 'em up with roguelike elements, because you need to survive waves of enemies to then grab coins and then upgrade your craft and the various different elements that you've added onto it. So you can buy different miniguns or laser beams or twin rockets or homing missiles, and you can add them onto your ship, and then as you go between wave to wave, you'll then upgrade them to their maximum limit. You can also get passive abilities such as drones that will fire, attack, or nurse drones that will drop health pickups, or maybe bombs that can just be thrown with an extra button as well. I found this game to be interesting and fun to play. It was like having a much more involved Survivors-like game, because you had to A, aim, but B, also move around with the thrusters. But it also felt like the game was incrementally getting disproportionately harder than the amount of money that you could actually buy and get upgrades to over time. And so it definitely needs some smoothing out of the difficulty curve, but what here is fun, and I think it scratches that itch for what if I like my shoot 'em ups Survivor-like. So UFO Blast stays on my wish list. Next up, and we go into creepy territory here, is Heartbeats, and this game wins the weirdest and most off-the-wall appearance and graphical art style in this list. But it also plays exceptionally well too. This is an arena shooter, or a twin stick arena shooter, I should say, where you pick a kind of weird dreamlike object and then you start firing things that are body parts that are trying to attack you. And that might be eyes shooting out laser beams, tongues dribbling acid across the floor, or just fists trying to punch you. And what was interesting here, and it didn't quite pan out well for me because I wasn't very good at the game, but I had great fun playing it, is that there's two types of attack. So a standard one where you'll just shoot out your main abilities and that will hit anything that's got a pink hue to it. But there were enemies that had an orange or yellowy hue to them, and that's where your special attack comes in, because some of them would only be killed with that special strong attack. What confused me was that the special attack on one of the characters you had in the demo just dashed through them and didn't seem to do any damage. So I was like, well, what do I do with these? And then it wasn't until I got killed by them, the orange enemies then went away. So I don't know if that's a bug or a feature, and I just didn't understand something. But this was hardcore. And what I loved about this game is that the better you got, the faster your heart rate became, because this is all taking place inside your body and your mind, and so the BPM goes up, and so everything starts moving faster, but so does the music and so does the graphical pulsation. It was really trying to get your blood pumping, and it was successful. So Heartbeats, definitely one to stay in the wish list, and anyone that likes the artier side of shoot 'em ups and twin stick shooters, this will be your jam. The next game on this list is a bit of an anomaly compared to everything else on this list, but it kind of belongs, and it's called First Break. I downloaded the demo for this because I thought it was an arena-based twin-stick shooter, and it kind of is, but it's as if a twin-stick shooter merged with curling, because what you need to do is to use your twin-stick shooting to shoot out a bullet so that you can push things around like they're on ice, so that you can get to a key and then get to the exit. But everything that's in this room is an enemy will chase you around and try and touch you, and you can't hit a wall, you can't hit any explosive like rings of dust. Everything kills you, which is a shame because there's a lot of it. But the real key innovation here is that as you shoot things, nothing really dies. It just gets pushed out of the way because everything's on ice. And so what you're trying to do is almost break the balls or break the puck like in snooker or in curling, so that it creates a momentary gap for you to get the key and then run to the exit. This game is tricky and difficult, but there is definitely something unique and interesting here, and so it stayed on my wish list as a curiosity, but I did have fun working out the mechanics and weirdness of it, and I did start to get into a flow and a theme, but it's going to require Twitch-based gameplay and like your thought power to recalibrate how you run around things that you're trying to push out of the way at the same time. So thumbs up, but a weird one. Talking of anomalies on this list, the next one up is 2, and that's Red Lightning. This is a vehicular retro, like super late 80s style shoot 'em up where you're driving around a vehicle instead of having a horizontal or vertical shoot 'em up, but the actual controls of how you do all of the shooting are like a twin stick shooter, so that's why I've put it in this list. I found this charming from I grew up with Commodore and Spectrum games, and like this feels like a mixture of a Commodore Spectrum game but with Sega Master System style graphics. And I can see this being potentially quite ugly for some people to play. For me, it's quite nostalgic. I did run into some issues where, as you moved through the environment, some of the environment needs to be blown up for you to proceed, but it doesn't telegraph or tell you anything about doing that. And so if you spend all of your big ammo up front, you will end up getting stuck. I also didn't appreciate the fact that there's a big timer on a lot of this. But the timer didn't really seem to do anything either, so that was a bit confusing. However, the actual moment-to-moment gameplay was really quite interesting and fun, and I think this one is for the older gamers like me who reminisce of times when an arcade shooter could be this simple and direct, I guess. And so from that point alone, it stays on my wish list, although again, it's towards the weaker end of the games that stayed on. On the flip side, Sektori was one of my favourites on this list, and it is visceral arcade hedonism. This is a arena-based twin-stick shooter where it's all about trying to get the cumulative kills and collecting the tokens that they leave behind, because they aren't XP, but they generate up power-ups to then distribute into different sectors of the screen, and so you then steer your ship through them, and it either gives you a momentary power-up where all of your guns are like triple power and triple width, so it then means that you can then shoot up more things and collect more tokens and keep the combo going, or it will trigger various extra special attacks. So it could be that you then charge forward and smash through things. And you have a charge power that can be used to get out of situations, because what Sektori does exceptionally well is to try and surround you with enemies at all times by dropping in rings of enemies. So they don't come in clumps, they come in rings around you, as well as throwing in big beefy bosses at the same time. Whilst all of that is going on, the sector of the Sektori is that parts of the arena fall away and get electrified, and so the shape of the environment is constantly changing, meaning that you're going to need to keep yourself on the move. I mean, you have to anyway with this game, but it means that you're going to have like little dead ends that you don't want to get stuck into, and little corners that you might end up getting stuck in, or if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time and having to run away from lots of things, you might run into a bit of the environment that then falls away and kills you. So this was just perfect arcade shooting. I cannot recommend this enough. Sektori will be an absolute day one. Moving into the first Survivors-like game on this list, Gigantes Ex Machina is probably one of the 3 best ones of the Survivor-like games that I've got on this list. And I really like the mech setup and the fact that you're going around a really destroyed, smashed up piece of rubble. But I also really like the fact that you can choose whether or not you want to automate your weapons or trigger them like a MMO style environment where you've got like lots of keyboard buttons and you can trigger things off like that as well. Now, I decided to automate quite a lot of mine during the demo because I was playing with controller, but I can absolutely see why keyboard controls would probably suit this game better, and that's why it's set up that way. However, what I also loved about this was the incremental increase of complexity of enemy attacks coming towards you and doing different things, and also sending out homing missiles as well as carpet bombing or setting the floor on fire so that you had to avoid certain areas, as well as setting off bosses in here too. The upgrades felt meaningful and interesting, and yeah, I mean, it didn't do anything like spectacularly new for the survivors-like genre, but what it did exceptionally well and was very playable. And I liked the aesthetic, I loved me some mechs, and I liked the anime story in the background that was taking place like a futuristic sci-fi anime. So thumbs up from me, Gigantes Ex Machina, one of the better survivor-likes out there. Talking of survivor-likes, we're now into Ark Odyssey. And this is a really fascinating game because it didn't play very well, but I really like what it's trying to do, and so it stayed on my wish list out of curiosity rather than me enjoying it. The idea behind this is that you have a thruster-based shoot-'em-up style game that then comes in waves that allows you to use the coins that you've collected from the waves to upgrade your crafting ship, which you will then get from your garage that you're busy upgrading, again through the coins that you get in between each run. And the ships that you get are totally up to you which ones you buy and whether you want to invest in upgrading them by buying 3 of the same type of ship to then level up their base stats. And the ships all do different things. They have different attributes and elements to them. Some of them can be more healing rather than shooting. It's entirely up to you. And the idea behind this I thought was fantastic. Alongside that, it also had 3 different setups of how your ships can be arranged. So circular, so fighting from the inside out, in a giant long line for a width of attack, or a delta, which is like an arrow, so that it's more focused and deadly. The problem with this game was much more in the actual gameplay when you was out in the field in battle, and it's because your aim and how it all works was just really cumbersome and slow, whilst the enemies were grossly overpowering you, and so you're losing ships constantly all the time, and I felt like it just wasn't very well balanced or very nice to play actually in the battles themselves. So this has stayed on my wish list for the idea of what it's trying to do rather than its execution so far, and I'll keep an eye on it because I quite like what this is trying to do. It's just, it needs to really smooth out the balance of gameplay and make the ability to turn your ship around and all of the ships alongside it faster, because that was the problem. Everything's coming at you from all different directions, and yet you waddle around like an 80-year-old granny trying to get round a corner with all of your ships, and that just doesn't help make a cohesive, fun game to play. Fully Dogomatic is next up, and I got to play as a corgi with guns. I mean, what's not to love? It stays on the wish list for that alone, to be fair. And the interesting thing with this was that your corgi can have up to 10 guns, and gun drops happen on a time-based environment. It's not about completing and shooting a certain amount of dogs. But where you placed your guns was entirely up to you on a circle of influence around you. So you could have all 10 guns facing in one direction, or you could spread them out so that you're trying to shoot everything around you. And yeah, that was kind of the big main thing with this. I did find that the shop needs to be rebalanced because the amount of times it offered me things that seemed more money than what I actually had, but that the pricing was dynamic depending on how much money I was taking to the shop, that it would always price something that was more than what I could ever get. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem fair. That felt odd. It also needs and is in desperate need of some enemy variety, because everything just kind of follows you around and it's just about being overcome by just a cloud of dogs coming towards you. They very rarely shoot or do anything. In fact, I don't think they shot at all, if I'm perfectly honest. And so from a survivors like being entertained perspective, it needs to do more than just have cute dogs and being able to arrange your guns around. And so I'd like more from this game. It stayed on my wish list mainly because of the aesthetic and I'm playing as a corgi with guns. And that might not be enough unless this is exceptionally cheap. Taking the survivors trope in a very different direction though was Karate Survivor. And I have to say, this is ingenious. The idea behind this is that instead of having lots of different weapons, you put together a chain of attacks that go together like a film strip at the bottom of the screen. And so you might start off with a punch, and then your next upgrade when you've collected enough money to upgrade yourself might be that you increase the power of the punch. But you can then put a punch and maybe a double punch or a kick or a roundhouse kick, and you'll slot that in so that over the course of time, as it kind of refreshes and then does your next chain of attack through the film loop, it will then do punch, punch, kick. And the different colours mean that you can then chain them together so that they are more powerful as a combo of attacks. But then over the course of time, you can also unlock additional things like kicking around balls or objects, or picking up mops or pink flamingos, or like little toy bats that you can smack people around the head with. And so through repeated runs, your character then becomes more proficient at karate, and using all of the things that you see in karate films as like stupid tropes in silly film sequences then become more of a reality in this game. I love the style and I love the graphics of it. I love the fact that the supermarket level that you play in just slowly disintegrates into chaos the more carnage you cause. This was great fun. And whilst it is a survivors-like game, it does so much to make it not feel like one that it feels like its own little mini subgenre in the survivors-like subgenre that's already created, if you know what I mean. This feels unique and unlike anything else that I've played in the Survivor sphere, and for that reason it deserves a big thumbs up, but it's also incredibly fun. So day one for me, definite buy. The other Survivors-like game I'll be buying on day one is TemTem Swarm. I loved this. It's really interesting to see a bigger studio taking on this type of game to see what can be done, and TemTem Swarm is really the realization of that. Absolutely gorgeous soundtrack, beautiful visuals, fluid dynamic gameplay where lots of different things are affecting what you need to do, and it's also adding in more to the survivors like gameplay loop that means that you have to do more. So there are bosses of other Temtems coming in that you need to defeat. You need to go and like hold ground and stay in certain areas and like guard certain checkpoints so that you can then have a new boss come and defend you. It felt like there was more going on than just survivors-like gameplay, and so it bridges this gap between being a survivors-like and a twin-stick shooter. It's somewhere in the middle. It's also incredibly cute in some ways because of all the different Temtems that you can unlock, and each one has the ability to evolve into a bigger form of itself as well. It was just perfection to play, and so this comes out in a few weeks and I'll be grabbing it on day one. And I didn't play the original TemTem because it was online only, and it was one of those games where I was like, grr, I wished it wasn't because I'd like to play this. Now I get to experience a TemTem world offline with a lot of shooting. So thumbs up for me, happy bunny. Next up is a unique game in this collection called Candy Rangers. And this is an on-rail shooter, but it also plays a little bit more like the point-blank games because you're using 4 rangers, each one with a different colour, and all of the enemies that are coming in will have their own crosshairs for you to hit, but you have to hit it with the right colour. And so you're choosing which button to shoot so that you can then shoot out the enemies with the right colour before they then hit you and then cause you to lose your health over time. And so that's what the on-rail shooter is. You're going through setup levels trying to get to the end. But you need to shoot quickly because there's a time limit and checkpoints where you will get more time to continue on down the paths. And so this was bright, colourful, beautiful, and reminded me of arcade mini games and point blank like duck shooting, but with a RPG theme to it, I guess. And there's nothing else quite out there like it, and I'm delighted that this exists because it was a joy to play. This will be another day one. Very funky too, so thumbs up from me. Okay, we're getting into the home straight and we're kicking off the next lot with Virus Rush plus Hazards of the Ages. And this is a psychedelic, weird and strange arena boss rush style shoot 'em up. It's playable in VR, and the demo kept launching in VR and then going error, error, but eventually I managed to get it to work, hurrah. And the weirdness around this is that you're travelling through the human body as a virus trying to kill other viruses. And so each one will have its own unique attack patterns and weapons, but then they'll spawn tinier folk. And some of them require being locked on to shoot and then hurt. Some of them can't be shot unless you stop locking on. And then one of the, I think, will be Marmite points of this game is that some enemies replenish their health at the speed faster than if you just auto shoot, and so you have to keep tapping the right trigger button to go faster than it replenishes its health so that you can then kill it. And I got very bored of that very quickly. But if that was solved and the camera was much easier to navigate with, because tying it to the left analog stick and a push down did not work for me in any way, shape or form, then I think there is a psychedelic, weird and wonderful off-the-beat-wall classic here in Virus Rush. But it just needs those two things addressing so that it can be a top-tier game. But absolutely staying on my wish list. Be looking forward to playing more. Next up on the list is Intergalactic Battle Roosters. And this is an interesting one where it's a thruster-based arena shooter, but it also has other roosters that will then come in and be like boss battles as if best of 3 rounds. And this game is hard as nails, because what I wasn't understanding, and perhaps it was the way how the demo was set up, you could only unlock certain power-ups that the demo was allowing you to do, but then that meant that when you hit the boss, you was at such a significant disadvantage with how the boss then went to charge and kill you. I couldn't actually escape the first boss, and so I've only played a little bit of this demo. The garish graphics, I think, are quite difficult in sometimes for you to be able to know what it is that you're shooting and pick out things. It just felt a little bit messy for me, but it was fast-paced and frantic, and the integration of Souls-like roguelike upgrades alongside different wave-based attacks and then proper one-on-one boss battles where it's best of 3, I thought was an interesting spin on the genre. So interested to see more, stays on my wish list. After all those great games, sadly we come across a game that didn't make my wish list cut, and it's Blood for the Old Gods. This game is a 1-to-4 player online or offline cooperative shooter, although even though I was offline, it was still making me connect online, which made me very confused. This game is slow and sluggish, and I think the plodding nature of this did no favours for how I enjoyed it, but neither did the really muddy graphic palette and the kind of cut-out cartoon nature that felt really scribbled on and angular and just not very pleasing to the eye. That then combined with some really ropey aiming and shooting that felt imprecise, and just the general plodding nature of this made it a slog to get through. But the biggest problem for me was how you generate ammo in this game. Because everything is demonic and Lovecraftian, you have this element where you need to trigger through various different commands a spell that can either send like fire down from the heavens or generate new ammo for you. And that's how you generate new ammo. But it's really unclear how you then generate more mana so that you can then generate more ammo. And so I kept running out of ammo constantly with no ability to understand how to regenerate it, and it didn't seem to work in the demo. I was confused and frustrated. I pretty much gave up on the game trying to get to the end of the level, and that was also because I couldn't seem to trigger whatever the end state of the level was, which made me even more frustrated that I'd had to go through this slog to get there. And so Blood for Old Gods, sadly, was removed from my wish list. The second game on this list that was removed from my wish list is this, Euclid's Inferno. I downloaded the demo for this because I loved the look and aesthetic of this, but it's a maze-like shooter, but the control scheme is absolutely like atrocious and you need 3 arms. So you're moving around your character on WASD. You have to move around your cursor with another either arrow key or the right analog stick on your controller, because for some reason the left analog stick or the D-pad didn't work for moving your character. But then you could shoot with space or the left button on your mouse. And so I ended up in a weird scenario where I was branching across several different peripherals with 2 hands, requiring 3 actions to happen all at once. And sadly, I don't have 3 arms, and it just made the game utterly unplayable for me, and I gave up very quickly, getting very frustrated. If that gets fixed, there might be a decent game here, but I was really angry with it, so I just removed it from my wish list. So I'm really sorry to the developer. It just felt like I needed 50 million hands, and I don't have them. The next game on this list did stay on my wish list though, and it's UltraMmega Planet Battles, or UMPB. And this is a 1 to 4 player twin stick shooter. And what I liked about this, although the demo didn't necessarily explore it, is that it's both a vertical shooter and a horizontal shooter, and there are elements of arena-based bits here too. And it changes up per level as you go through the game. What was here was fine. It didn't break the bank in terms of providing me absolutely magnificent twin stick shooting, but I quite liked what was here. I didn't like the fact that the enemies just seemed to chase you around and butt you, and they seemed faster than you, as if it wasn't well balanced for a single player run. So this is on my wish list. It was towards the weaker end of the scale, but what was here was fine, and I gave it a kind of lukewarm thumbs up. Alright, we're at the penultimate game on this list. Well done for sticking this far. But you've got to Fireball 2, and this is the hidden gem on the list. Instead of shooting things, you're avoiding everything as the fireball, but then you'll get various little pockets of bombs and supernovas that you will then charge and blast through. And you need to do it as close to enemies as possible, so you kind of drag them around with you and gather them up and then deposit them next to where you want this explosion to take place. And then they'll ripple out and kill enemies around you, scoring millions of points. And the more you do this, the more they start to chain react. And then you'll start unlocking novas, which is where you'll do a burst through one and then you'll burst back through and it will ripple out an even bigger explosion. This game is really moreish and addictive, and it's very fast and frantic too, because one hit death means it's game over very quickly, but you have to avoid everything that's going on around you whilst knowing exactly how far you can push, getting them close up to you to get the biggest bang for your buck, literally. I also adore the graphical warp effect that's going on with the fireball and the flame around it. I want that as a screensaver. Like, give me Windows 98 screensaver vibes with just that effect. I'll be happy. So yeah, Fireball 2, real hidden gem in this list, and that'll be a day one purchase for me. Well done everyone for making it to the final game on this list, and it is called Super Reaktor, and it is a day one buy for me. It's also unique and weird. You play as this, almost like a breakout style bat, but in the middle of it is an energy collection laser, and the 2 sides at the end are what you need to keep safe. And each level will have various chemicals in it. And one chemical you want to collect by expanding or contracting and rotating and manoeuvring your bat around so that the energy flies through the laser and gets captured by you. And then there will be a negative energy which you either want to also capture through your laser because it helps you get more points, or you just want to avoid it hitting your sides, because if you hit the sides, you then lose health. And the amount of energy you collect on the good energy is what keeps your health going, but also generates your score. So you want to collect as much as possible, and sometimes going for more and taking the odd hit is just kind of par for the course. But it's as if you are spinning around, turning and gyrating and manoeuvring, as well as constricting and expanding your bat to work out how to capture the most amount of energy as possible without getting caught on the sides. It was fast, visceral, real head scratchy sometimes, because you're not used to having to manipulate characters and ideas in this format before, but it was moreish and addictive. And this is the type of arcade unique innovation that I love to see in these types of smaller niche indie games that offer something that is genuinely a unique experience, and Super Reaktor offers just that. And that brings you to the end of this absolute mammoth video. Thank you so much for your time if you've taken the chance to take a look at these. Let me know down in the comments if there are any games that you'd like the look of and fancy wishlisting. And I've not really done a shoot 'em up bullet hell or survivors-like theme Next Fest video before, so if this was interesting and you'd like to see this done on future Steam Next Fests, let me know too. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.